trafficking bus rescue operations, election defense, and the Biden show. This was pretty much my first part to this stream that I'm doing now, where I laid out the legal framework and the legalities surrounding the military coup that we're currently under right now. Talked about the use of the military to bust human traffickers, rescue the victims, the military's involvement in the election, and the purpose. And we touched on the purpose for the Biden show a little bit. But tonight we're going to dig a little deeper into this military coup. Now, Q said on November 1st, 2017, think about it logically. The only way is the military, fully controlled, safe, and spread. Once 11.3 verifies as first marker, biggest advance drop on politicians. And 11.3, we now know is not only a date, which was election day 2020, but it's also initials for KC, who is Kevin Kleinsmith, who was also an espionage agent that was arrested during the Trump administration. But that's a whole different story. We're talking about the election. So in this sense, 11.3 represents the election day of 2020. Okay. So let's make no mistake about it. Where is that slide? There was another slide here. Here it is. Oh, okay. It's in the sequence. Now, on 11.3, executive order on imposing certain sanctions in the event of foreign interference in a United States election. On November 3rd, 2020, this executive order took effect. It took effect in the sense that the governmental structure that's outlined in this executive order, and the executive order number is EO13848. Sorry. And in this executive order, it laid out the structure for the military government, where the director of national intelligence would be the guy in charge of the military, acting as basically second in command to the commander in chief. So all agencies and units will report to the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, and the Director of National Intelligence would then report directly to the commander in chief. On 11.3, because of the election fraud that we saw, Executive Order 13848 took effect. But if you notice, this executive order was issued right before the midterm elections of 2018. September 12th, 2018 was when the executive order was actually issued. And that's because Trump, the Patriots, and the military also knew that there would be foreign interference in the 2018 midterm. So from the midterms all the way up to 2020 and even into going into 2024 elections, the military has had a close eye on everything, and so has Trump as commander-in-chief. Now, if you look up Operation Cybercom, that's basically that article from the Army Times basically outlines or details how the military cyber units have been created in order to monitor the elections. And not only has cyber units been created to monitor the elections, but boots on the ground operatives, undercover operatives, have been sent out as well to work at these polling stations to witness the fraud firsthand, take notes of who's involved in the fraud so justice can be had, and also to get the correct count of the votes in order to determine who is actually the winner of the election. They did this in 2020 with the presidential election and determined that Trump won the election. Thus, Trump remained commander-in-chief. And the reason why the military had to count the votes is because they needed to know who they were going to be taking orders from and who the American people actually put in charge. Once it was confirmed that Trump was elected the president by the American people and the election was stolen from him by massive fraud, the military then sprung into action with the mop-up operations, concluding the 2020 roundups, and also they commenced the Joe Biden show. And the Joe Biden show was basically the cover operation to conceal the fact that the United States of America, at least the federal government, is under military control. This is why throughout all 4 years that Biden's been in office, we have seen no federal laws passed. If you go and look back in previous presidencies, there have been federal legislation passed against the people within the first 100 days. When it comes to Joe Biden, not one single piece of legislation out of the House of Representatives, the Senate, or Joe Biden has been signed into law. And by law, I mean law that regulates the people. They've passed several resolutions and bills and proposals and internal legislation which governs the government. But as far as passing laws to govern the people, they have been restricted from doing so. And it's funny because if you think back to the inauguration in 2021, from 2021 to midterms of 2022, the Democratic Party, who is the party of legalized pedophilia, the party of civil disarmament, taking your guns away and taking away your Second Amendment, the party of anti-free speech, have not passed any legislation, even though they control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They have not passed any legislation to push forward any part of their sinister agenda, and that's because they simply cannot. Now, when it comes to the Director of National Intelligence, you have to understand the DNI is a very, very important role. It's such an important role, in fact, that the Director of National Intelligence is able to fill in for the president. And this is verified by Google a long, long time ago, back in 2021. Google actually had Richard Grenell, who was Trump's acting Director of National Intelligence in 2020. At the time, Executive Order 13848 took effect, in fact. Richard Grenell was actually listed as the President of the United States since 2021. Because once Inauguration Day passed, the stolen election had been solidified. The seams had been sealed. The crime had been complete. And once the crime was complete, the military government structure took over with Richard Grenell at the helm. That's why Google, periodically listed him as the President of the United States, along with Donald Trump and along with Joe Biden. There was also a time back in 2020 when when you Google search Democrats, the Democrat Party logo on their webpage was changed from a donkey to a rat. And that was the signal to let you guys know that the Patriots have control of these operating systems, and they're the ones dropping these gems and dropping these bits of intel, like Richard Grenell being listed as the President of the United States. That's because Executive Order 13848 took effect and the new military structure of government was established. Okay? And it took effect because the American people kept getting screwed out of their votes through the election fraud, and something needed to be done, which was a soft military coup in order to remove the bad actors who were facilitating this election fraud and return the power of the votes back to the American people. Now, on May 8th, 2020, Q said shadow presidency, shadow government, insurgency, irregular warfare. And funny enough, back in the summer of 2020, it was referring to the Obama administration as the shadow presidency, the Democratic Party as the shadow government, or at least their puppet masters behind the scenes as the shadow government. The insurgency were the riots and the boots on the ground, and the irregular warfare was the deployment of the U.S. military under the guise of civil riot control, just like you said, in order to round up and arrest the ringleaders and organizers and funders of these violent riots. But today, the shadow presidency, shadow government, insurgency, and irregular warfare is actually Donald Trump as the commander-in-chief behind the scenes. The shadow government is the military government structure established by Executive Order 13848. And the Urgency is we the people fighting tooth.